Welcome. My name is James Boland, and I'm the founder and president of the Australian community. Today, we are speaking with Zjantelle Cammisa Markel, who is the principal of Cammisa Markel, a New York immigration practice. Zjantelle, welcome.
Thanks, James. It's good to be back.
Zjantelle, finally, we have great news for those with an EAD.
Yes. So on Friday, November 12th, USCIS issued a policy alert that said that anyone in H, that's an H spouse, an E spouse, or an L visa spouse. So if you're in L2 status or E3D status, or you're the dependent spouse of an E1 or E2 visa, or the dependent spouse of an H1B visa, which is an H4 status, what they said is that you will get automatic authorization to keep on working as soon as you have filed the renewal of your EAD. So I'm going to explain it a little bit because there are some parameters around it, James. So what they've said is that as long as you timely file your extension, and that means you file the extension before your current EAD card expires, that then your work authorization will automatically continue up until one of 3 dates. And of those 3 dates, it's the soonest of them that is when your work authorization will continue until. So this is really important for people to be aware of. And that is the 3 dates are: 1, the expiration of your current I-94. 2 is either the approval or denial of the extension application that you filed. So if you've filed the 765 and it gets approved, you'll be able to continue working. But if it gets denied, then you would have to stop working at that point. Hopefully it won't get denied. And the third date is 6 months after the expiration of your current EAD card. So if you filed an extension, but now it's been pending for 180 days, then at the 180-day mark, you've got to stop working. Okay, so what this means, James, is that if you've filed your extension of your EAD, but now your EAD card has been, your current EAD card is expired more than 6 months, then you won't get the benefit of that automatic extension. Likewise, if your I-94 is already expired or expiring in a week or two, you won't get that automatic extension of the work authorization rights. So James, anyone in a position whose I-94 might be expired or about to expire, what that person might want to consider doing is leaving, re-entering and getting an updated I-94. That might also require consular processing, another visa. And then they'll have a long-dated I-94. And even if their EAD card is about to expire, as long as they file their extension right before that card expires, they're now going to have a longer dated I-94. And that means they would be able to continue working for at least 180 days after the expiry of their current EAD. And hopefully by that point, their new EAD will come through and approved. And if it's not, hopefully within the next 6 months, what will go into effect is the other second big set of news, which is that E and L spouses are going to be considered work authorized incidental to their status. And what that means is that just by being in E3D status or L2 status or E2D status or E1D status, just coming in that status on your I-94 will allow you to automatically work without having to get an EAD. So that's going to be amazing once that's in effect. It's not quite yet in effect because DHS, Department of Homeland Security, has said there's no way right now to determine the difference between an I-94 for an E-dependent and L-dependent spouse and an E or L-dependent child, because they both will say E3D or L2, even if it's a spouse or child. So what they have said is that they want to update the I-94s so that there'll be a distinction between whether the person is a spouse or child. And then that I-94 that shows that you're an L or E dependent spouse will allow you to use that for I-9 purposes to secure employment. So that's going to be really great. as soon as that goes into effect. And we'll do another update, James, of course, as soon as that is in effect.
So that's going to make life so much easier for anyone on an E3 dependent visa coming into the States. That's awesome.
Absolutely. Well, so anyone that is currently in the position where they want to take advantage of the automatic extension, if they qualify to, what they would do to show their employer that they are authorized to work, either maybe they can resume working now. So this would be someone that might have filed their EAD extension, let's say a month ago, and their current card is less than, only expired a month ago. So they still have, more time. They could keep working for another 5 months. They could resume working now and keep working for another 5 months, as long as their I-94 is still valid. So if their I-94 is going to expire, we just have to keep remembering that, then that's at the point that they wouldn't be able to work. But in order to show a current employer the documents that would suffice for the I-9 so that they can resume working or continue working, the things they're going to show is their valid I-94, the receipt notice from the 765 filing, and the expired EAD card. The receipt notice and the expired EAD card need to show the same class of EAD has been requested. So you need to be renewing an EAD as a E dependent or an L dependent. So you can't interchange the two. But as long as you're requesting your EAD, the renewal, 765 renewal, requests the same class as the EAD that was issued to you on your expired class, then that will suffice for continued work authorization.
Well, this is all great news. No matter which way you look at it, it's just awesome news for anyone on an EAD, because we know how traumatic almost that has been for people, because if their card's expiring in 6 months, they have to start planning to get a consular appointment so that they can continue working and not have their EAD expire. So this is great news.
Yeah, that was the policy behind the memo, or the intention behind the memo, was to try and minimize these gaps in employment that people have been facing. And also what we'll see as a result of this, because once spouses and L spouses are deemed work authorized incidental to status and not having to apply for EADs anymore, we're going to see the other categories that do require EADs get their EAD cards hopefully sooner, because there'll be fewer cards needing to be processed for people. That's so right. I think they're just trying to eliminate a lot of the backlogs that have been caused through COVID and during this time.
Zjantelle, a question that I've been getting from a lot of members is that we know that Australia is opening up now, and that the US now is starting to look to vaccinations as a prerequisite for certain nations who couldn't enter the US before to now enter. Are we seeing that opening up translate to consular appointments, or is it still the status quo that it is very difficult to get a consular appointment right now?
This is an awesome question, James. So what we saw as of November 8th, previous to November 8th, we had the travel bans in place for people traveling to the US from the UK, Ireland, all of the Schengen countries, Brazil, Iran, China, South Africa, and India. So if you'd been in one of those places in the 14 days prior to entering the US, you were unable to enter the US without getting a national interest exemption, or going to spend 14 days in an unrestricted country first. So as of November 8th, they ended that ban, which was great, because we've had so many clients that didn't even know about the ban and found themselves stranded in Europe a number of times, and then struggling to get NIEs or having to travel somewhere for 14 days to re-enter the US. So now that has ended on November 8th, the thing that did go into effect was that any non-immigrant, so anyone that is not a green card holder or a US citizen, does need to be fully vaccinated to be able to enter the United States. US citizens and green card holders can get into the US without being vaccinated, but they would need to get a COVID test within 24 was taken 24 hours before entering the US. All passengers, regardless of whether you are vaccinated or not, and remember, you have to be vaccinated if you are a non-immigrant and wanting to enter the US as a tourist on a visa. So all of our E3s, E3Ds, everyone on a visa needs to be vaccinated to enter the US. And they also need to still do the COVID test and get the results and the test has to have been taken within 3 days, within the 3-day window of entering the US. So it's really important that people don't forget that they're still going to have to show the negative COVID test, even if they are fully vaccinated. So it's not a matter of just being fully vaccinated. That leads to your question as, is this opening up consulate opportunities? Well, what we've seen is that the problem is that the consulates are still not really providing that many appointment slots for third country nationals. And most of our members, James, are considered third country nationals if they're going not other than Australia, right? Well, it's still a matter of hunting and pecking for appointments, but it does open up all those consulates in Europe as an option to apply to, because before, to apply to one of those, you would also have to qualify for an NIE against the travel ban at the same time. So you weren't able to just try to get an emergency appointment, any of those, unless you felt confident that you'd also be able to get an NIE approved. Now we don't need the NIE, so more people can try in any of the consulates in Europe, which are a bit closer than going all the way back to Australia. They can now try and get an appointment there and not have to worry about the travel ban requirement as well. So we are seeing more of the European consulates granting appointments to third country nationals now that the travel ban has ended. So previously we did see, for example, Athens would not grant a E3 visa appointment unless you already had an NIE approved, which usually you get the NIE approved at the consulate. So a lot of the time they were saying, we're not going to issue this person an appointment because they're subject to the travel ban. Now they can't say that. So now someone could try and apply for an appointment or emergency appointment in Athens, say. I'm just using that one as an example because they were one that specifically would say, because of the travel ban, we're not giving you an appointment.
Well, also too, the trap in there is that you have to be in a country where you can get a 3-day COVID test. Not every country or every, like if you're staying in some little villa in the remote part of Italy, doesn't necessarily mean you can get your COVID test back in 3 days before you fly back. So that's also something that you've got to be part of the equation of traveling to Europe or any of these countries that are under a ban. And also to a degree, now with Australia opening up, you don't have the additional expense of a hotel quarantine because you can do a home quarantine. And that's going to save, between $3,000 and $7,000, $8,000 to the cost of returning to Australia for a consular appointment.
Well, the cool thing is that as of November 1, people could travel back to could get out of Australia, right? And now they can go back to Australia. And in Melbourne and Victoria, you don't even have to do any quarantine. Now Melbourne and Victoria are open for travellers to get to. The beauty of that is that, James, we had the hardest, I think it was the toughest time leading up to that when the border between Victoria and New South Wales was closed, and New South Wales and Perth as well was closed. It was toughest for our clients in Sydney to get a visa to come to the US, because especially if they'd never had an E3 before. If they'd had an E3 before, they were eligible for the mail-in. But if you weren't eligible for the mail-in and you needed a visa appointment, we were finding it easier to get people an E3 visa and start working by sending them outside of Australia than getting visas inside of Australia, because the Sydney consulate was closed. They actually have just moved address. And so in the move, they've been closed and not even facilitating mail-ins. So people had to get either to Melbourne or Perth, which they couldn't, to do an appointment. So we were redirecting people through. We had one person, go through Dubai, for example, do the visa appointment in Dubai and then come to the US. Or we had somebody else go through Colombia, do the visa appointment and then come to the US. And that was a faster way than waiting for the borders to open within Australia and or the Sydney consulate to open. But now what it means is that someone from Sydney could fly to Melbourne, get their visa and then come leave. People from South Australia, Queensland could fly now to Melbourne or Sydney. And Sydney's not facilitating appointments right now, but Melbourne, and then get their visa and fly out, which is great. And Australians that want to go back right now, I can't tell you how many clients have now decided that they're going to go back for the holidays. I'm sure all of those flights to Australia are full, because I know every day we get a new client saying, well, I've decided I'm going to go back and do my renewal there. And the nice thing is with the mail-in is that a lot of those clients, because they're renewing in the same visa class, are able to just do the mail in Australia. So they can just go home, enjoy time with their families, and not even have to worry about going to a visa appointment, which is really nice.
Well, Zjantelle, this is all great news. I'm sure there's a lot of smiling Australians out there, very relieved Australians, very excited Australians hearing this news. So, of course, as we say, this isn't something that you might necessarily want to try and do yourself. It's always best to get professional advice, because especially with dates, it can be a little bit confusing for the untrained eye, so to speak. But this is great news. And Zjantelle, thank you so much for your time today. We really do appreciate these updates.
Oh, you're welcome, James. I love doing them. I love doing them.
And if someone wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way to do that?
Probably the info@cammisamarkel.com, which is info at Cammisa Markel, is spelled CAMMISAMARKEL.com.
We'll make sure to put that in the comments below. But thank.
Well, I decided that one's easier than saying Zjantelle at Cammisa Markel and then trying to spell out Zjantelle as well. We'll be here for another half hour.
All right, Zjantelle, look, thanks so much. And we look forward to speaking again when there's better news again.
Yeah, absolutely. When the work authorization incidental to status for the E's and L's, that's going to be the real party.
That's going to be great. You just land here and guess what? You can start working straight away.
I know. So great.
That's great. Awesome. Look, thanks, Zjantelle. We'll see you soon.
All right. Bye,
Take
James.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.